Namaskar, Dadaji.
Namaskar, namaskar.
Tell us how you got involved with Ananda Marga. What led you to get initiated?
Well, the simple and short version of the story is that on my first day of, I was in my first year of university in the U.S. And on the first day of classes, coming back after the New Year holiday, and I was taking one particular class, which at that time in 1974 was leading edge. It was called interpersonal communication. And the teachers pair up with someone we had never met yet and get to know each other for 5 to 10 minutes. And the brother I sat down with was a Margi at the time. So after sharing things we had in common, the kind of music we liked and walking in nature and etc., he invited me, he told me about that he practiced meditation and yoga and invited me to an introductory class. A few nights later, I went and I learned Baba Nam Kevala meditation, and from the next morning, I never stopped. That's the short version. And I grew up in a middle-class suburban family and was, of course, born in the mid. I was born the same year as Ananda Marga started, so I was coming of age in the 60s and the time of the counterculture, and I was playing music, rock music, and I was influenced by all the times and the music and things happening at the time in the West, and became very idealistic and wanted to change the world. And after becoming delusioned with and no longer interested in the religion of the family that I grew up in, my spiritual seeking started, and was interested in all kinds of things that were quasi-spiritual maybe, but at the time that I heard about meditation from that brother in my university class, I really didn't know much about it at all. I knew the Beatles had a guru, but the shoe fit between sorry?
I was just going to say that led you to becoming a Margi, and what led you to becoming or seeing Baba and or becoming a whole timer?
After my second year of university, I left my studies and became an LFT. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life at the time, and particularly by pursuing studies, and had the feeling that the things that I was interested in possibly doing, like becoming a teacher or a community organizer, I could do it through Ananda Marga. The experience that I was having in my practices, and the more and more I dove into studying the philosophy, the more I was filled with inspiration. And many people know Brother Giridhara, Tom Barefoot, who passed away not so long ago. And he and another brother came through my unit as LFTs for Renaissance Universal, gave a presentation, and I was swept off my feet. And so I became an LFT in the summer or in the autumn of 75. And did that for 4 years. And throughout that time, of course, I had thought about what to do, which way to go in life. I was ready for anything and asking for inner guidance. But fortunately, I consider myself very fortunate, very blessed. I never had to actually never decided to become a whole timer. I just knew. On my 23rd birthday, while doing several days of sadhana out in beautiful places in nature together with my LFT colleagues in the PU, in Protestant Universal, sectorial or national office at the time. I climbed up a mountain before sunrise and sat and did a 2-hour, beautifully blissful mountaintop early morning sunrise meditation. And when I finished that particular session of sadhana, I just knew my being was just totally clear that this is what I was to do with myself in my life. It took about a year until later I finally went when Baba was coming to Fish in Switzerland. But I never actually consciously decided. It was an epiphany, and it was extremely powerful.
So tell us about your first meeting with Baba.
So I first saw Baba physically when I was in Fish, and had my PC, which was, you can say, my first meeting with him, of course. But I flew over with a group of Margis. I think it was maybe the first time in my life I flew, certainly internationally. And from the flight, we got on a train, and then on some buses, and then another little train again in Switzerland. And anyway, after all this journey, hours and hours and hours, we finally arrived in Fish in a taxi. And literally the moment we arrived, there was this huge commotion, and everyone was, Baba's coming, Baba's coming. And we just got out of the taxi and literally like threw our bags in one corner, and with bated breath, and this big door opened to the darshan hall, and I was like, yes, and I saw Baba walking in, and it was very anticlimactic. The first thing that came in my mind was, oh, Baba's really short. But a day later, because I was on my way to whole timer training, I was given priority. So I was the second person to get PC. I went up to the house when my name was called. Dada Ramananji was standing on the inside of the door. It was a screen door with just a netting between us. And he looked through the door, and without opening it, and he just looked at me and he said, okay. And then he turned around and proceeded to go somewhere in the house. So I opened the door and followed him. And I went down this little corridor, and he went into a room on the left. So when I came to the threshold, and immediately I understood that I shouldn't have followed him, and I was somewhere I shouldn't be at the moment. I was too soon. Baba was sitting on the bed in a singlet and a simple lungi, nothing like, we see Baba in the photos and everything. And it was just totally abundantly clear to me that I wasn't supposed to be there yet, but I just stood in the doorway and staring at Baba. And Dada was busy at his back to me, and he was folding towels or clothes of Baba or something. After a few minutes, he turned around and he noticed me, and he jumped like a tiger, and then he grabbed me from the back of my shoulders and like literally dragged me down the hall, put me on the floor, and do sadhana. So and then after a few minutes, he came again and said, okay, come. So now I went back in the room, and Baba was properly dressed in his beautiful kurta and dhoti, and I did my sashtang pramanam, and get up, come closer, sit closer. So I came and I sat just beside his cot. He started talking like it was a room full of hundreds of people, like giving a lecture. He said, well, no, excuse me. First, he asked me the normal questions. What is your name, and where were you initiated, and who's your acharya? And when he asked me who I was initiated, I told, because I was initiated in Carbondale, Illinois, where Southern Illinois University is, and I was very conscious that it was the first unit of Ananda Marga in New York sector, and Ravi Bhattacharya had been there, I think Dada Shabmu Shivananji, and during their studies. And so I said with a bit of, pride in my voice, well, I was initiated in Carbondale. And Baba just went, I felt like I'd been slapped. And then he started saying, "So you've been given these bones and this blood, and what are you going to do?" I said, "Baba, and I hope to become a Dada, hope to become an Acharya." And he said, "You hope?" It was like he was lecturing a room full of, "You hope? So many people in this world are hoping for this and wishing for that and thinking of this, and nothing becomes of anything. You don't hope, you do." And then he leaned over, like very, he leaned over the cot, and so his face was very, like right near in front of mine. "You should do as I do. You should do something practical in your life. You should do as I do." And then he blessed me, put his hand on my Sahasrara chakra. I felt some kind of tingling in the base of my spine. And then there was just silence. And I was feeling very, very awkward. I was feeling very inhibited and shy. And things were going through my mind like in a mechanical way. And I was thinking, "Oh, I'm with Baba, I'm with Guru. I should massage his feet, or I can sit on his lap," but I couldn't make a move. I felt like frozen, but Baba would just sat there looking at me. I remember, he tilted his head and he looked at me. And there, after a few minutes of silence, and he said, "Don't you know how much I love you?" And then again, he reached over and again, he blessed me. And then he said, "Okay, other people are waiting here." I left the room feeling like it was so simple, brief, but I was filled with this feeling that he knew me better than I knew myself. And during that week together in Fiesh, I had some other wonderful, beautiful, up-close moments and with him as well. 2 other particular very beautiful moments. I was given responsibility by Dada Dharma Vedananji, who I met for the first time there also, as in the VSS guard and as the supervisor of all the other security guards in the darshan hall. So, and here I was from New York sector, from the USA, and not knowing anyone in Europe, and almost everyone there, 400 or 500 people mainly from Europe. And but being the supervisor, being the in charge, gave me the freedom to position myself anywhere I wanted to be, because I had to move around and see how everybody was doing and what was happening. So I noticed, and as many of us, every one of us who have been to either in India or anywhere else where Baba was regularly doing programs, I think every time he would enter and every time he would exit from the darshan hall, he would stop at that entrance and exit point, stop at that door, and spend a few moments chit-chatting and greeting whoever was near to that door. So noticing that for the first day or two, I stationed myself at that door. So it was the morning of Ananda Purnima, and Baba finished his morning darshan, and he was coming down from the dais, and all the guards, all the GB and guards would form a human link, and Baba would walk behind between the link and the wall, keeping a barrier between all the margis. And he was making his way down this corridor, that we would create towards the door. And all hundreds and hundreds of people were shouting again and again and again, "Parampita Baba ki, Parampita Baba ki, Jai." And it was a huge sports hall, and it was a huge echo in it. And it was just so loud and booming. And I got like some reaction. I was standing there by the door in my uniform, in my khaki uniform. And and some reaction came in my mind, there was just so much noise already, just stop. And as soon as that thought passed through my mind, suddenly it was like I was filled with this thought that, oh, today is Baba's birthday. There had been no announcement, no mention of it at all, but suddenly I had remembered it. And by that time, Baba was standing already by the door with his back to me, facing me, and I was very nearby. And he was, greeting the people there and saying small things. And then suddenly, totally out of the decorum of being a VSS card, I said, Baba, happy birthday, Baba. And he turned around and he looked at me with this big namaskar and this wonderful smile on his face. And his lips did not move. I remember so clearly. His lips did not move at all, but I heard his voice in my mind. And he said, how nice someone remembered to say. So that was a very special moment for me.
That was beautiful.
And then, yeah. And then on the last evening, the evening of the last darshan, again being in charge of all the other people in VSS, and nobody wanted to miss the last darshan. Somebody, every time Baba would go to darshan, someone had to stay at guard duty at the little chalet that he was staying in. And nobody wanted to go because nobody wanted that duty that night because everyone wanted to be in the last program, and I could not convince anyone. So finally I said, okay, you all go and I'll stay at Baba's house. And which I did. And it was, we're up in the Swiss Alps, and it was just really, really special feeling, summer evening, and just a beautiful atmosphere. And of course, the vibration around Baba's small house, the chalet, was just amazing. Didi Ananda Karuna and Ratiji, many know this senior Margi brother from India, who and his wife had traveled with Baba. They were inside the house preparing Baba's dinner, and I was outside the front door. Time was passing. I don't know why, but there was a guitar there. So I played bhajans, in some kirtan at the time, and so I sat down and I was singing bhajans and playing, which of course you're not supposed to do when you're on VSS guard duty. And suddenly the door of the next house, which is where all the senior dadas and the entourage of Baba were staying, opened, and out walks Dada Japananda, who was the global VSS in charge. He later was my examiner in training as well. So I sort of like, and quietly put the guitar down and quietly stand up. But he was very cool. He just walked past and as it was a little bit past me already, and he sort of looked back, half looked back with a glance in his eyes, When someone is on guard duty, one should not be playing bhajan, should they? And continued on his way to the darshan hall. But anyway, a few moments passed again. It was a beautiful feeling around the place. And after a little while, I heard a car coming. There was one small lane that came and ended at that house. And I heard this car coming in, and I was thinking, who would be coming here? There's nothing for them to come to. This is only leads to, and then suddenly it was like watching the sunrise. Suddenly this thought rose up in my consciousness, and I said, oh, it must be Baba. And sure enough, after a moment or two, the car pulled around the bend, and there's Baba in the back seat, and Dada Ramananji, and this one brother who was the designated driver, one brother from Switzerland. And, immediately I'm thinking, well, there's 400 or 500 people back in the darshan hall, and you hardly get the chance to come close to Baba. And now there's 6 of us here. Baba's right here with us. So he comes out, and as he so usually did, he walked slowly with his hands behind his back. and he came up the steps, and of course I was in my uniform, khaki uniform, and I came to salute, and as he crosses me, coming to the threshold, and he looks up at me and grabs my cheek, and he slaps me and they're screaming, "You're a good boy, you're a good boy." And then by that time, the people in the house had heard, that some noise outside, so they'd opened the door, but they were still inside the house. So the three of them were inside the house, inside the doorway, and the three of us, me and Dadaji and the driver, were on the outside, and Baba was standing in between all of us in the center. And he started telling jokes. And I had no idea at first what he was talking about. But he said, "These mixed marriages," and he used that term, he didn't say revolutionary marriages, "these mixed marriages are very interesting, very, very interesting. Do you know that in French language, the word for bread is pain, and the spelling is Pain. And the exact same spelling in English has an entirely different meaning." Laughing at his own joke. And I was like, I had absolutely no, so what is he talking about? But it was just so wonderful. It was like so sweet and intimate moment. There were just the six of us standing around, and Baba's humoring, he's like I thought it was like a grandfather, telling jokes to the grandchildren, so it was just so beautiful. And of course, after me misbehaving on my guard duty, the way he came up and slapped me and touched my cheek. Very beautiful.
That's beautiful, Dada.
I was just going to say, the next day the program finished, and I made my way hitchhiking to through Switzerland and Germany, and then up to Copenhagen, where the Protestant Universal Global Office had already been established. And after a day, I think there, together with a sister from Italy who is now Didyananda Devika, if I remember correctly, in Devamala in Sanklebury and in the Banarak project in Thailand. We hitchhiked together to the village of Idrefors in Sweden and arrived at the training center.
Okay, so I understand you were the first to get posted to Russia. Can you tell us something about that experience?
Well, I wasn't posted there. It was in 1983. I was a sectorial PU worker at the time. And I loved to go to new fields, and we knew that Baba wanted someone to go into the East Bloc countries. And so I wound up going to Leningrad. I went together with Brother Prem from Helsinki, and we went by bus or by train on one of these weekend organized tours. Everything is supposed to be highly controlled. Very special set of experiences we got. So we arrived there. We arrived at the hotel in the evening, in the night, and of course we told we were vegetarians. We were given bread and cheese and water, and then we had some contact phone numbers in Dada Shambhu Shivananji, and maybe one or two other. We could have some contacts, I think, from flights, Aeroflot flights, or maybe in India or somewhere. But we had several phone numbers. We told the people in the room next to us the next morning that not to worry about us. We were going to be okay. We didn't go to all the organized trips, that everyone was supposed to go on, but that we were going to try and meet some friends. So we went on our own into town. And after spending some hours that evening when we arrived in the hotel room, and we went to sleep. And the next morning we woke up for Panchajanya. But we were so conscious to not do anything that would attract attention, so we literally were whispering in our room. We were the only ones in the room, but we were whispering kirtan, and stepping very lightly on the carpet. But the vibration was so powerful. We both felt, it was like so strong. And that was also just really reinforcing. So we headed out from the hotel in Leningrad, and with our few phone numbers, and we spent some time trying to make phone calls with absolutely no result whatsoever. So then, knowing that Baba always recommended to go to universities to do prachar, we headed to one of the main, I don't know which one, but one of the big main universities in Leningrad in those days. And we arrived at lunchtime, and we went to the cafeteria, and just surveying the scene for a few moments, and one particular brother caught my eye. You can say, for some reason, he just seemed the person to speak to. So we approached him, and he did speak English, and he agreed to have lunch with us. And so we got a tray of some food we could eat, and went down to sit by the tables. And Prem and I were sitting on one side of the table, and he was sitting across from us at the other side of the table. And a few moments passed with just a kind of little bit awkward silence. He was sort of looking down at his lap, and the food was sitting on the table in front of him. And then he raised his eyes, and he raised his head and looked at us across the table, and in a kind of shy voice said, I'm a vegetarian. Here we are, the first time in the Soviet Union, in a city which at that time probably had 10 million people. And the first person that we begin to talk to is a vegetarian. So we told him that I was a teacher of meditation and yoga, and came to just try to meet interested people there. And he was immediately very enthusiastic. He said, I have a whole group of friends who would love to meet you. And indeed, he arranged later that evening, we went with him back to a place. In those days in the Soviet Union, they had these, what they called communal apartments. They were huge apartments, huge. And different families would occupy different parts of it, each having like 2 huge rooms for themselves with their own kitchen, etc. Anyway, he had this friends, they were living in one like this. So later that evening, about 15 people came. Younger people, not very young. Some of them were young like him, students. And time passed, teaching, talking, sharing philosophy. I initiated, I think, about 8 brothers and taught the same number of sisters, Bhavanam Kevalam, in a group. And we never once mentioned the words Ananda Marga. We spoke about Tantra Yoga. We never mentioned the word Prout. We spoke about progressive socialism. And they were soaking everything up like sponges. They were so interested, so enthusiastic. They loved philosophy. And we talked and talked and talked, and we did some kirtan and some meditation, and the whole night was passing, literally. We stayed up all night. About 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and of course all of this was being translated because most of them had very limited English, some of them not at all. But at 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, one of the brothers who spoke a bit more English asked me to come with him away from the others, and we went into one corner alone. And he asked me, they knew that I was called Dada. He said, Dada, are you people from Ananda Marga? And I couldn't help but hide the look on my face, of course, And he said, we've been waiting for you. They make such horrible negative news about you in the newspapers and magazines. We knew you must be very good. You know, the Soviet news service was called Pravda, which means the truth. And the people, whatever they read, they believed the opposite. So it was very interesting. And then it was already dawn, you know, and people had to get ready and go to their work or their studies the next day. People were getting ready to leave. So everyone wanted to go outside and take a group photograph. So we went to the back side of this apartment building and we were lining up on the wall. And I noticed some graffiti written on the wall behind us and it was going to come in the photo. It was in Cyrillic script, which I didn't know yet at the time. And so I asked them, "Oh, what does it say?" And so it says Baba.
Wow.
Baba is a short form for babushka, the word for grandmother. The affectionate term is Baba. So between the kirtan, the powerful Panchajanya vibration in the hotel room, the first brother we meeting being a vegetarian and introducing us to this whole group, to this brother asking me if we're Nanda Marga, and then the icing on the cake that we're taking a group photograph with Baba on the graffiti. It was just such a lovely experience. That was the first, that was in 1983. As far as I know, the first time any whole timer went, any Dada. And Didi Ananda Vinita at the time, now Manju in Canada, had gone to Tallinn, to Estonia, which at that time was part of the Soviet Union, of course. And later, before, again, I was in Russia, in the far east of Russia in the early 90s with a team, but she had also gone there previous to us in the 80s at some point. But I think as far as I know, it was the first time a Dada went into the Soviet Union. So magical. And I made some subsequent visits as well that were filled with delight. So.
Amazing.
I'm sorry, couldn't hear you, Narada?
I said it was amazing.
Oh, yes. And of course, now that was all pioneering work, as well as the work that a whole group of us did. Wonderful work in the early 90s, from 1990. Dada Krishna Sevananda and Dharma Vedananda went in 90 or 91. And then there was a whole group of workers that really worked nicely as a team in those years until 95 or 6, and things changed a bit after that, the people who were there. But all of that was, of course, laying seeds, sowing seeds, and laying a base for now the incredible work that's being done by Dada Sadhanandaji initially, and now his initiates and others following on in that, Didi Ananda Sanjana throughout the Soviet Russia, where there's more than 1,000 active Margis, from what I understand.
Yes, I've met some of the active Margis from Russia.
Yes, just amazing flow. I hear there's 300 people attending Dharma Chakras in Moscow now, in Moskva, and about 200 in St. Petersburg, formerly Leningrad. So it's just an amazing feat.
Yeah, amazing.
So very exemplary for everyone in the world to do.
So you had some other Baba experiences you wanted to say?
Well, my first time to India was in 1981 for Dharma Samiksha. That was also filled with interesting experiences. I had arrived in Mumbai at the time, or Bombay at the time, by myself, and after exploring a little bit around that day and evening, the next day I met up. So I was working in Stockholm and Oslo regions in those days, in Scandinavian countries, and the next day I was scheduled to meet a group who were all coming also on their way to Dharma Samiksha, including Vasudeva from Norway, who so many people know, and a few others. So we gathered together in Victoria Station in Bombay, and it was a holiday season, I guess, and there was absolutely no train available whatsoever. We tried and tried and tried. There were no trains available. But somehow Vasudev had contacted the assistant station master. And I don't know how it came about, but in the course of conversation, he happened to mention that I was with them and that I was Jewish. I grew up in a Jewish family, and this assistant station master in Bombay was also, there's a very small percentage of Indians that are Jewish, and you know how sentimental they are about their different religions or castes or whatever the sentiment may be. So it like changed everything, and this man, Vasudev brought him to meet me, and between being a sannyasi and also like this, he was totally sentimentalized. They added an entire bogie or a wagon onto the train for us.
Wow.
and they wrote in chalk, this is 81 in India. They wrote in chalk on the doors outside, foreign tourists only.
Wow.
It was a third class wagon, with just bars on the windows and these rough benches, up and down berth. Anyway, I think there were 17 of us and there were 16 berths. So we had really cushy. Right? And we started on this, I guess it was the Bombay Mail. We started on this 36-hour journey, in those days from Mumbai to Calcutta. And on the way, of course, we'd stop in all these different small towns and places, and we were like animals in a zoo. People would come to the windows and outside and just hold the cages and look through us through the bars. And so many of these, Margis had like, Scandinavian, they were like yellow blonde hair, and so we were really an exhibit. And of course, we couldn't keep all that space for ourselves. There was no way our ethics would allow that. So at time, along the way, we let different people come in and stay with us, and etc. But when we pulled into Kanpur station, I was resting on my back. It was in the hot afternoon, and I was resting on my back up on one of the upper berths. And I heard Vasudev at one of the windows talking to a man, and the conversation went something like this, Vasudev greeted him, and then he was asking him if he knew different gurus that had become well known in the West, and so he was, oh, so do you know Maharishi Mahesh Yogi? And the man was, yes. I was together with him in Varanasi 10 years ago. He's God. And then he'd ask the next name, and I don't know, Guru Maharaji or Bhagwan Rajadish, whoever it was at the time. And every time this man would have the similar reply, yes, we were together in Kashi, in Varanasi 15 years ago, and he's also God. And every name Vasudev made 3 or 4 names. The similar kind of reply came from the man. So I was lying on my back and I was listening to all this, and I began to chuckle. I was Maheshwar Brahmachari at the time. I hadn't become Avadhuta yet. And I was very well known to all these Margis because I was their RS. And so I came down and came down to sit next to Vasudev, and I met the man, and he was a sadhu. And really, literally, he was shining. He had such an ojas. His face was shining. His eyes were brilliant. I was very struck by his countenance. And then but still, I couldn't help, but make a joke. So I said, there was one young fellow who came to the West, not long back. He was known as Maheshwar Brahmachari. Yes. I was together with him, 10 years ago. He's also God. And everyone started laughing. And I learned 2 things immediately in that conversation. I got a very deep insight into Indian ethical. The man was obviously lying through his teeth by our Western morality standards, but in his subjective world, I don't think he felt he was lying at all. And how everything is Brahma. It was a delightful little adventure. When I went to see Baba for Dharma Samiksha, I went there with a bucket list in my head of all the things that Baba was going to call me out on. I don't do my night sadhana regularly. My fourth sadhana before sleeping. All my lacunas that I was aware of in my own personal lifestyle and discipline. And I had this. But when I came in front of Baba, it was he gave attention to something. It was very personal, so I won't go into it. But it was like completely off my radar. And it was something that at that point in my life, I had it wasn't an issue for me at all. But years later, I understood, very well, it kicked in. And I could only think back to that moment when he was drawing attention to this thing. So, and I think probably many people have heard this story before, not about me personally at all, but out of all the people that came to see Baba for Dharma Samiksha, and everyone, of course, getting punishment and being given asanas personally, and all, Baba making comments about how to become an ideal person and all this. As far as I know, there were only two, maybe two or three, one or two from India and one sister from outside Aruna, from the north of Sweden. And when she came in front of Baba, to everyone's amazement, Baba said, "She's a very good girl. I have nothing to say." Everybody was dumbstruck. So, then a period of time went when I was working in Belin sector, and years had passed, and I had this incredibly deep desire, really deep need and desire to not only go and see Baba again, but also to get some attention from him, to get some affection from him. And the opportunity came in the summer of 1988. I was transferred from Belin sector to Hong Kong sector. And on the way, I had the opportunity to go to India. And I arrived in Tiljala. It was July or August 1988. And it was a very lively time. Baba was sitting twice every day with different groups of margis and workers, and taking these small exams, giving little, asking all kinds of questions, about philosophy, about nature, about history, about just anything and everything. And each day, each session, or every few days, there was a specified group of people, according to their organizational responsibility. So, for example, for 3 days, it was all the Bhukti Pradhans of the west area of India, or for the next 3 days, all the Prout LFTs from the northern part of India, or like this. And every few days it was changing. Who was chosen to go in front and get the opportunity to answer the questions. And of course, nobody likes to give a wrong answer in front of Baba. So much of the time, people were remaining silent, and nobody wants to give a wrong reply, and everybody wants to hear the answer Baba will give. So there was a lot of moments of silence, and all kinds of little dramas were taking place. And many of us know how whenever there was a special program of Baba's, Dadas and Didis would want to impress Baba with the numbers they'd bring, so they just fill up vehicles or trains or buses with people from newly initiated people, or from villages or towns nearby, and they would come, and they're not even established margis yet. Sorry. And so it was so obvious to me on some days that there were crowds like this. There were these young guys who were coming in front of Baba, and they were so nervous. Their knees were knocking together, and they were so nervous, and they had no idea what to say. And I could see they were brand new margis, if even margis, because they were calling Baba sir. Baba would say something, and they would go, "Huh, sir." And I was watching all this. I said, "Yes, sir, you're calling Guru sir? How absurd." And at watching them and how nervous they were, I remembered about my own PC and how during my own PC, and I forgot I left a few things off when I told the story, but I was like feeling so inhibited and so, strange and shy. And at that moment, now 9 years later, and watching this scene in front of Baba, I said inside myself, I said, when my turn comes, I'm not be shy. I'm not going to blow my dance again like I did during personal contact. So day after day after day, these dramas went on, and I was there for 14 days, and all that time in this sea of hundreds of people from India, Nepal, maybe Bangladesh or Ceylon, Sri Lanka, there were only 3 white-skinned people all that time. Myself, Dada Vishwarupananji, and Jayanta Kumarji from Australia. And the 3 of us stood together every day by the door that Baba used to exit and enter the reporting room. He walked past us, going in and going out every morning and every evening. And not once during those 14 days did I even get a moment of eye contact, not the least recognition or acknowledgement of my existence. And every day I was feeling crushed. And I'd go to PA Dada and GS Dada afterwards and they'd give me a chance, let me go see Baba, Anyway, on the 15th day, everything changed. All those 2 weeks, Delhi sector reporting. And that day, it was time for the overseas sectors to report. And the place cleared out. There was like no one around. And that evening, we were about 20 dadas that went into the room for reporting. Now, there are 8 other sectors outside of the Delhi sector. There were 8 representatives from that month was the reporting of SDM, Seva Dharma Mission. And there were the 8 SS Dadas and a handful of the, central workers who were accompanying Baba. And because everyone knew I had come from far and I hadn't seen Baba for a long time and I was so eager, so they also allowed me into the room. But I was not officially there. I was not reporting. So I sort of sat back in the shadows in the back corner of the room. And the drama began. But I entered the room and is crossed from the door to the dais to sit down in front of everyone. He said one sentence in English. He said, and so the man had to surrender everything at the altar of the judge. There was no context for us. Obviously, he was completing some story he had been telling maybe on his evening walk. But anyway, something about a legal case. But he sat down in front of everyone. He sat down so majestically. He had both his hands on this walking stick. And then he looked at everyone and he asked, what is the difference between the English word altar, A-L-T-A-R, and the English word altar, A-L-T-E-R? And then he said, these SS Dadas, they are senior fellows. They certainly know the answer. Let these young chaps have a chance. So one by one, these 8 dadas from representing SDM. Somebody was from India, somebody from Japan, someone from Germany, someone from Italy, I don't remember, but everyone spoke English, of course, and it's a pretty simple question. But for one reason or another, one by one, no one could answer the question. And Baba eliminated them one by one. And I remember one dada went in front and he hesitated for a moment. He didn't say anything. And then Baba said, you don't know you. If you don't know, you should say, I don't know. It is not a crime It is not a sin to say, I don't know. And then one by one, he told each of the dadas, when he eliminated them, to go and stand at the far end of the room, far wall of the room, with their legs spread out more than shoulder width and arms spread out, raised high. So after 5 minutes, there were these 8 dadas against the wall, standing in this spread eagle position. And then I see Baba leaning over and chatting with GS Dada or whoever was there, and they're looking at each other. And then Baba's looking at me and looking again at GS and worrying some more, and then looking at me. I'm watching from the shadows all of this happen, and I know the answer. And I wasn't feeling shy. So then Baba was looked and he said, let him come. So I came forward and I gave my simple answer to his question. And he heard my reply. And he sort of looked again at GS to his side and looked at me. And he said, he gave a proper reply. And then he asked me 2 more questions. And the questions he asked me were about Prout. He asked, what is the psychological difference between the cooperative system and the commune system? And then communism. And then he asked, what is the difference between subordinated coordination and coordinated cooperation? Subordinated cooperation and coordinated cooperation. And I gave a simple reply to each of those. I had been working in the PU department for many years. Not that that made me any more qualified. And he very graciously accepted both of my answers. And then he said, anyway, just in case you decide to splice it in, he said with this mudra, come here, my boy, come here, my boy. And I dove into Sastang Pranam with one hand holding one of his feet and one hand holding the other foot and my head on both feet. And I was just lying in that position for some moments. And then I heard him saying, get up, come closer. I'm lying down with my head on the floor and looking up, and he's saying, and that's why I raise my head up and I look up at him from the floor, and he's saying, get up, come closer, get up. So I got up on my knees, and I had my head in his lap, and I was embracing him, holding him around his waist, and he was again stroking my head and flapping my feet, my cheek. Sorry, I have a little precious dart in here next to me from the neighbors, and say, you're a good boy, you're a good boy. And I felt like a slab of butter on a plate in the sun, just melting in rays of his love.
Wow.
Now, just some footnotes, but which embellish it, the beauty of it. But everyone in the room that evening spoke English, and the question was really simple. I mean, my reply was an altar, it's something you do worship at, and another type of altar is when you change direction or transform something. Everyone English, but it just so happened that I was the only native English speaker that night. But more nicely, more intimately, the questions he asked me about Prout, and no one else knew this. That day, and the day before, and maybe the day before that also, I was helping in the PU office upstairs, typing in to the computer what was going to be the next volume published of Prout in a Nutshell. And that day or the day before was exactly those chapters about cooperatives and coordinated cooperation that he asked me the questions on. So that whole 2 weeks was set up for little old me. And I couldn't imagine. And I went there, with this desire for some attention, some affection. And that was the tip of an iceberg. That was a full week of being brought in the limelight. I was again invited specially into another session, this time with the SSs, in Baba's private room, reporting in Baba's private room. And this drama was going on, where he was, quote unquote, beating everyone. But what was happening was GS was beating, indeed, with a big stick, but they were taking this incredibly huge book. Like you never see it big, and so many, it must have been 1,000 or 2 pages, and so big, and they were putting it on their thigh, and the stick is hitting the thigh, and Baba's looking the other direction and beat him more, So and they were So my turn came, and because I answered those questions the night before, so Baba said, Mahaprajinananda, he thinks he knows very much, but he does very little. Beat him harder. And then he said, beat him until this sweet fragrance comes from his anahata chakra. So, I had my hand raised, and Baba, Baba, and there was absolutely no fragrance that I could smell whatsoever. But he was, he said, GS Dada, come and verify, And so GS Dada had to come and sniff near my anahata chakra, verifying, Baba, fragrance is coming, And Baba said, what is that fragrance, Mogra is jasmine in Hindi and Bengali, jasmine, but nothing was there. The conclusion was on the final day, departure day from the RDS, there was the fine tradition that the Dadas and Didis who came as representatives would garland Baba. And there was always a little drama. Baba was going up the stairs to his house at Lake Gardens, and then Keshavananda was PA at the time, I think, and he went up to Baba, and whispered to Baba's ear something about us going, and isn't it possible that we give garland? Baba, he agreed. So when my turn came and I put the garland around Baba, and he said, Mahaprajinananda, that little boy who likes the sweet smell to come from his anahata chakra.
A very sweet ending.